Chapter 3. All that I knew of Indian died in the winter of 1961, when I was 8 years old. My grandmother, Naomi, was very old then. She was the matriarch of the small band of people I was born to. We still lived a bush life at that time. We had little contact with anyone besides the Zenagush at the northern store in Menaki, where we took our furs and berries, or the odd group of wandering Indians who stumbled across our camps. If there was ever a sign of an approaching stranger, our grandmother hurried my brother Benjamin and me off into the bush. We would stay there until the stranger departed, even if that took a day or so. There was a spectre in our camp. We could see the shadow of this dark being in the lines of our mother's face. She would sometimes sit huddled close to the fire, clutching and unclenching her fists, her eyes dark moons in the firelight. She never spoke at times like that, never could be comforted. I'd walk to her and take her hand, but she didn't notice me. It was as if she was under the influence of a potent medicine no shaman had the power to break. The spectre lived in the other adults too, my father and my aunt and uncle, but it was most chilling presence was in my mother. The school, she would whisper then, the school. It was the school that Naomi hid us from. It was the school that had turned my mother so far inward she sometimes ceased to exist in the outside world. Naomi had seen the adults of our camp taken away as children. She'd seen them return bearing a sorrow that could not be reached. And when my grandfather died, she took her family back to the land, hoping that an Ojibwe life might heal them and ease their pain. Besides my brother, I had a sister that I never met. Her name was Rachel, and the year before I was born, she disappeared. She was 6. The Zenagush came across the water, our grandmother told Benjamin and me one time when we were hidden in the trees. It was the end of August, and we were coming back to the river from the summer camp near One Man Lake. Our canoes were full of berries. We planned to go to Menaki to sell them and buy supplies for the winter. We were tired. I never thought they'd come in the dawn. I always thought the Zenagush slept late like fat old bears. But they walked into our camp and I pulled my robe up over Benjamin, who was so small, and hid him from their view. But they found Rachel and they took her away in their boat. I stood on the rocks and watched them. They had a boat with a motor, and when they rounded the bend in the river, I thought how fast things can vanish from our view. Her screams hung in the air like smoke from a green fire, but even they finally vanished, and all that was left was the wake from the boat slapping at the rocks at my feet. That's all I carry of her now, the wet slap of water on the rocks. Every time I hear it, I remember the dawn the white men came and stole Rachel from us. So we hid from the white man. Benjamin and I developed the quick ears of bush people. When we detected the drone of an engine, we knew to run. We'd grab the old lady's hand and scuttle into the trees and find a place to secret ourselves away until we knew for certain that there was no danger. I learned English at the same time I learned Ojibwe. My father taught me to read from Zenagush books, taught me to form the sounds the letters built with the tip of his finger as my guide. They felt hard, those white man words, sharp and pointed on my tongue. Old Naomi fought against it, trying to throw the books in the fire. They come in different ways, the Zenagush, she said. Their talk and their stories can sneak you away as quick as their boats. So I grew up afraid of the white man. As it turned out, I had reason to be. In 1957, when I was 4, they got my brother Benjamin. The old lady and I were gathering roots in a glade back of the trees that stood against the river. The men and my brother were at the foot of the rapids. Setting gill nets. The airplane came out of the west, and we did not hear it soon enough. Naomi and I made it to the cleft in the rocks, but the men and my brother had nowhere to go. The plane cut them off, and we crawled up out of our crevice in the rocks and watched as those men from the plane lowered a canoe and forced my family's canoe to the opposite shore. They had guns, those Zenagush. I thought that if they hadn't, my father and my uncle would have fought them off and we would have run into the back country, but they took my brother at gunpoint and pushed him up into the plane. My mother collapsed on the long, flat rock that reached out into the river at our camp. No one could move her. She lay there for days, and it was only the chill of the first autumn rains that got her up and on her feet and back to the fire. She was lost to me then, I could see that. She was gaunt and drained from days of weeping, a tent of skin over her bones. When Benjamin disappeared, he carried a part of her away with him, and there was nothing anyone could do to fill it. My father tried. He never left her side for weeks. But now that she had lost 2 children, she would not speak anything except the school. The words like a bruise in the air. So we left her, and he and my uncle paddled off downriver to sell the berries. When they returned, they brought the white man with them in brown bottles. Spirits, Naomi called them, bad spirits. Those spirits made the grown-ups move in strange, jerky ways, and their talk was twisted. I fell asleep to evil laughter. Sometimes my mother lurched to her feet and danced around the fire. In the shadow she threw against the skin of the tent was like the outline of a skeleton. I clutched my robe tight to my throat, lay across the space my brother once filled, and waited for sleep to claim me. On clear nights, the old woman and I would sit on the rocks by the edge of the river, the stars pinwheeled above us, and we would hear wolves calling to each other. Naomi told me stories of the old days, told me about my grandfather and the medicine ways he carried. Good medicine, powerful Ojibwe medicine. The river wound serpentine radiant in the light of the northern moon. In its curling wash, I sometimes thought I could hear songs sung in Ojibwe, honor songs, raising me above the hurt of my brother's absence. The voice sustained me, as did the firm, warm hand of Naomi on the thin blade of my shoulder.